let's start by talking about, you as a writer and a dramatic writer, and this notion of, what do I have to say? What am I writing about? What do I have to say? And that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself as a writer to think that you uh, have some sort of special insight into people and the world, and that you have something that you have to say to everybody else. And um, it's also kind of a grandiose notion that I, you know, uh, have something important to say. But we talk about that all the time, and it's kind of crippling for a writer, especially for a young writer. And so I like to get you away from that notion. And it's something I heard Francis Coppola say in an interview many years ago. And the way he posited it is that the artist poses a question. And the work of art is the process. And the process of creating the work of art answers the question. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples of that, to make that a little bit more concrete. So I asked you over the summer to familiarize yourself with 3 films, and the films were Gravity,
Explore's been hit. Explorer, do you read?
Wizard of Oz,
I am Dorothy.
and Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so let's use those as our touch points to look at this idea of the artist posing a question, asking a question, and the work of art answering it. So we're going to pause the video here. It's going to get interrupted, and you're going to get a little kind of multiple choice thing uh, giving you an idea of what question might be posed in these various works of art. Okay, so let's take a look at those examples and look at the correct answers. I guess the correct answers is the way to put it. Um, okay, so again, artist asks a question, the work of art answers the question. And I think from those little examples that you saw, it starts to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So let's pop down here and take a look at Wizard of Oz. I like to use Wizard of Oz, because it's a film most people are familiar with, and also, a film like this, a lot of the bones are extremely accessible, right? So we can see them right away. It's obvious, for lack of a better word. Okay, so Wizard of Oz, and it posed, what questions, you sort of had the choice of what questions it might pose. But certainly, one of the central questions of Wizard of Oz is, will Dorothy go back to Kansas, or will she stay in Oz, right? The whole story is her wanting to run away from home, and then she gets there, and she's having these crazy adventures, and it doesn't seem like she'll, get back, so maybe she'll end up staying in Oz. So that is the story, a question certainly posed in The Wizard of Oz. The other question certainly posed in Wizard of Oz, is there a better place over the rainbow, right? She said, I'm way over the rainbow, right? That she's longing that there's someplace better than this crappy black and white world with Miss Gulch wants to take away her dog, and her Auntie Em and the uncle aren't standing up for her, and blah blah blah. So there's some other place, and it's that old adage: is the grass greener on the other side of the fence? Right? I think it's clear that that question is being posed. Less clear, let's say, uh, maybe less clear, is in Gravity. Certainly One of the questions posed, or one of the central questions posed in Gravity is, will she make it back to Earth, right? The whole story begins with her being, her spacecraft being destroyed and her being flung off into space, and the whole process of the movie is her trying to make it back to Earth alive. But the other question, again, that may be less obvious, she doesn't sing a song about it the way that Dorothy does, is um, she is someone, we get this brief bit of story information when she's talking with George Clooney's character about her daughter dying.
She was 4. She was at school playing tag, slipped, hit her head, and that was it. Stupidest thing. I was driving when I got the call, so ever since then, that's what I do. I wake up, I go to work, and I just drive.
And she's come to space because she's dead inside. She's given up on life. She doesn't really care if she lives or dies. She's got nothing left to live for. And so it, the film also poses this question, will she be reborn? Will she find a new sense of purpose? And we could extend that into, can we recover from the loss of a child? Can a parent ever recover from the loss of a child? And kind of go on moving forward with their life. Okay, Romeo and Juliet. Um, I think the central question, absolutely, will they be together? Right? The story hinges on the two lovers wanting to be together, and the story poses the question, will they? The other question posed, I think, is pretty clear, is can love conquer all? Can love overcome the hatred of these two feuding families, or will the feuds of the families, destroy love? So what we start to see is two types of questions emerge. And these two types of questions are intrinsic but separate from each other. One question we can think of as our story question. Okay, and that's something that's tangible, right? That we know when it's happened. We can hold it in our hand. It's clear and attainable. So, for instance, Dorothy will either get back to Kansas or she'll stay in Oz. We can grab onto that. We know that's tangible. We know when that happens. Will she make it back to Earth alive? But will she make it back to Earth? We know when that either happens or doesn't happen. It's tangible, it's attainable, and it's concrete. Will our lovers end up together? Right, Romeo and Juliet. Again, they're either going to end up together or not. One could argue the way it ends up that they do end up together, even though they're dead. But the story is going to answer that, and it's a tangible, clear, attainable question. So that's our story. We can call that our story question. Okay. And then there's another type of question that isn't quite so clear, uh, which is the thematic question, right? And it's not tangible, right? It's something more abstract. So if we come back and look, is there a better place over the rainbow? Well, that's, uh, it's grappling with that, but it's more of a thematic. It's like, is the grass greener? It's sort of an abstraction. It's philosophical, maybe. For some people the grass might be greener, and others it might not be greener. There's a lot more to it. The same thing here, the thematic question. You know, can we recover from the loss of a child? It's not so. There's no right answer, right? The filmmaker, the artist, is going to explore that. Will she be reborn, find a sense of purpose? Romeo and Juliet. Can love conquer all? Again, that's not a black and white answer or cut and dry answer, and there's no right answer, right? So it's more what we would say intangible. It's the thematic question, the intangible, the thematic question that most, as we as writers, as artists, that we're interested in. That's the most compelling thing to get us to tell our stories. Um, the great questions of life, right? Can love conquer all? Is there a better place out there? Can we, overcome the death of a child? These are the questions, that really drive why these people told these stories. So the artist poses these questions, and then we set about answering them. Uh, and what we're after is discovering the truth, right? The true answer to that thematic question. And it's presenting the truth as you have found it to be, presenting your truth in the form of a story. So when they talk about, finding truth as an artist, here you are answering this question and to the best of your ability, finding the truth to that answer. So that's what you have to say, as an artist, is the truth you have discovered in your process, your journey to that truth. You're convincing us, the audience. You're explaining to us, winning us over to your version of the truth. That journey, that act of convincing us is your story, is the drama. Yeah, a newspaper editorial can just, present the truth that it has found to us in a series of logic, steps of logic, right, of explaining it to us. By being a dramatist, you've chosen to make your argument with the actions and, stuff of human interaction. You can't just say, here's my truth, now accept it. Your audience has their own version of truth. But if you prove your truth, if you bring your audience step by step through your argument for the truth, then you have the chance of winning them over. So Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, what truth is he after, right? Can love conquer all? Uh, the answer is, in essence, yes. The love will bring these, feuding families together, but he takes us through the emotions that we feel when Romeo and Juliet are unfairly kept apart, or more so, when they take their lives. It's with tears streaming down our faces that we agree that this fighting between the families is no good, and look what it's wrought, and how could you have let these two houses fail, these, young people, and, don't you see now, and bury the sword, right? And it's a huge rush of emotion, right? And that's what the dramatist deals in, is in emotions, right? The essayist, the journalist deals in logic. We deal in emotion. So keep yourself open to the process of discovery while answering your question. That's the whole point. Don't know the answer to your question. Uh, Anything that you write where you come up with a different answer than you thought you were going to is probably going to be a great piece of writing. To know the answer and then just write to the answer, or to know the answer to the question and then just write to that answer, is when a story feels contrived. Because it is contrived. It's just a contrivance. You're not on a journey. You're not discovering anything. You're just pointing directly at the target. So when you're writing, we don't necessarily, start with this question, so perfectly formed. We start writing a piece with, other thoughts. This week, you're going to get a writing prompt. The prompt is simply either prostitution or an event that changed my life. And, you're going to go through a lot of different paths to how you start writing and what kind of little glimmers of inspiration get you writing, and it's going to be after you've written that we'll begin to look at what question it is you're posing, and finding how you can go about finding the truth about that question. So that initial spur into writing comes in a lot of different ways. But eventually you're going to discern what it is you're about, right? What question that you're confronting. So at first, just write. So we've been talking now about this thematic question, that question that the artist is most interested in, these big questions of life. And we had this other question, though, that I want to go back to, what we were calling this tangible story question. Another way to think about these questions, and I think that's very helpful, is the story question is what happens, right? The sort of the events of the story, and the thematic question, what it means. Okay, that's I think a really great way to look at that. So let's talk though about the story question. Um, so will Dorothy, uh, you know, go back to Kansas? Will our heroine in Gravity make it back to Earth alive? Will Romeo and Juliet end up together? Okay, um, so this story question um, is basically telling your audience, or we understand where your story is going, where it's headed. Okay, we always know the end of every story because the story question has been posed, and so we know that it's either going to be answered one way or the other. So where your story is going, not how it's going to get there. Okay, um, so. While you have a general idea, most people have a general idea of, where their story is going to end up. Just like in the thematic, uh, answering the thematic question, be open to exploring what happens with the story question. Maybe Dorothy doesn't go back to Kansas. The writer has to keep that possibility always alive in their writing. Maybe Romeo and Juliet, don't end up together, and the families, solve their feud. Maybe the character in Gravity doesn't make it back to Earth. So in your writing, at every level, always keep room for discovery. Keep open. Don't just think, I've got my idea and I'm going to write to that conclusion. Okay. Um, this tangible question is the very foundation of the drama, okay, this story question. And I like to think about it this way, and this is the way we teach it here. And that is that every character has a want, okay? That something they're trying to accomplish. Dorothy wants to run away from home because of bad Miss Gulch and all of that. Our woman in outer space wants to get back to Earth alive, and Romeo and Juliet want to be together. And so you can see that the story question and the want are basically one and the same thing. So story question, will Dorothy escape Kansas, is the same as the want. Dorothy wants to run away from Kansas. Okay? As soon as a character, and this is true in life as well as drama, as soon as they want something, um, the question arises, will they or won't they get it? Right? This question is your story. So, what happens as soon as anybody wants something? And this is true in drama as well as life. So let me put that up here. As soon as somebody wants something, what happens? We encounter conflict, right? Like you may decide I'm going to go to college and that's the want, and the conflict immediately begins. I have to apply and get accepted to a college, and what college would I want to go to, and where am I going to find the money to go to college? As soon as we want something, we encounter conflict. And that is especially true in the drama. We want, in fact, lots of conflict because uh, it's called dramatic conflict, right? And that's what makes the drama. So you've got a character who wants something, and they encounter conflict. Dorothy wants to run away from home and get, save her dog from Miss Gulch and everything, and she immediately runs into conflict regarding that. The wizard guy that she first bumps into, and he says, "Oh, look at you! There's your Annie M, and she's home crying." And so she rushes back, and so that's conflict to her want of getting away. And then she gets swept up in this tornado, and she kind of gets given her wish to get away, but she's torn because she wants to go back home, but she's in this new, colorful, fantastic place and makes these wonderful friends. All those friends are conflict to Dorothy making it back home. They make Oz seem like a better place than Kansas, right? And the Emerald City is so beautiful. All of that is conflict to Dorothy's, goal of, um, getting back. There's kind of that duality thing. She wants to run away, but she feels guilty about it. She's torn about it. So, it's confusing sometimes. It's like, she wants to get back to Kansas, but really the question is, will she leave or stay in Oz? At any rate, so dramatic conflict, that's what we're in the business of providing. You can write a short story or a novel, a piece of prose writing that does not have conflict in it. And it's, while you can tell a story that way, it is not a drama. Okay, it's something else. Um, so our want forms this question, will the astronaut woman make it back to Earth? And then we want to look at what the relationship is between that question and the thematic question. Um, and this is one of the hardest parts of dramatic writing. And getting these two questions to be intrinsic to one another. Okay, and we can look at, we can say sort of aligning the two questions, and I've kind of created, you see how they dovetail in each of these. Will Dorothy discover that the grass is greener over the rainbow and not go back to Kansas? Okay, the two questions are embedded in that um, uh, that one uh, statement. Gravity. Will she find it in herself to hang on to life and make it back to Earth alive, right? So can she get over the death of her daughter and in doing so find a will to live and make it back to Earth alive? Romeo and Juliet. Will the families, drop their feud and let the young lovers be together? Now I know they're dead at the end, but I guess we assume they're going to be buried together and they'll be together in eternity because these families have, have buried the hatchet. But again, you see how the thematic and the story question kind of line up beautifully. Um, they line up so beautifully. These stories make it seem simple because they are done and they're near perfect. They're archetypes of their form, and it takes hours of agony, making it look so easy, of writing and refining these things and getting everything just right. But the more beautifully these questions intertwine and resonate with each other, the more compelling a work of art they create. Um, so painters work with light, color, texture, form. Dramatists work with people, people's wants and hopes, and the successes and failures and all the interactions of human life. But most importantly, the dramatist deals in the currency of emotions. Um, so um, once you discover, so again, write free form at first. When you do these assignments this week, um, let it just come out. Something you'll grab onto something with your imagination, and you'll start to write the story. Uh, and then it's after that when you start to refine and find out what you're about, and that's what we'll start doing next week as we workshop your writing. So again, when you sit down to write, just grab on in any way you can, and don't worry about having a story question yet or a thematic question. But I did want to begin an introduction with you to the mechanics of writing. To looking at the very beginnings of looking at the components of what makes up good dramatic writing. Okay, so finally, a lot of young writers, it's very common, are worried that their story has been told before, okay, that they're going to be cliche. And so I'll leave you with the words of James Joyce. If you haven't heard of James Joyce, one of the great uh, literary novelists of the 20th century, strongly encourage you to read uh, his short stories Dubliners, his first novel Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, his most famous work Ulysses, you might have heard of, and then his most difficult and famous work, Finnegan's Wake, after that. But James Joyce said, don't worry if your story has been told before, because for the first time in the history of the universe, it's you that's writing it. And it will be different than anyone else's version of that story. Shakespeare only wrote, I might be wrong, one or two, but I think it's only wrote one original story. All the others were stories that were around and people were telling him and and Romeo and Juliet. He just told them better than anybody else. So I think the one that he was original to Shakespeare is The Tempest. Okay, so have a great time writing your assignment. Again, let it flow, grab on wherever you need to grab on to find the story, and then we'll start working on refining the ideas next week. We'll see you then.